Imagine this. You're sitting in a quiet room. There are no distractions. No phones, no voices, no flashing screens demanding your attention. Just you, the silence, and your thoughts. At first, it feels peaceful. But within minutes, a strange discomfort begins to emerge. You shift in your seat. You clear your throat. You notice your mind darting. To something you said 3 years ago, to a mistake you haven't forgiven yourself for, to a future you're not sure you'll survive. The silence doesn't feel like silence anymore. It feels like confrontation. And here comes the terrifying part. It's not the world outside that is attacking you. It's you. It's your own mind. Turning inward like a snake devouring itself. But why? How can something as intimate as your own mind become a source of suffering? You trust it to make decisions. You rely on it to navigate life. It speaks to you in your own voice, so convincingly, so confidently. And yet, it lies to you. It sabotages you. It drags you into despair, anxiety, regret, comparison, and chaos. It tells you you're not enough. It reminds you of every past failure while convincing you the future is doomed. It builds fantasies and fears with the same conviction, and punishes you whether or not you believe them. It is the voice that keeps you up at night. The one that rewrites history. The one that whispers, even in moments of joy, this won't last. Here's the paradox no one prepares you for. The one thing you cannot escape, your own mind, is the one thing that can turn against you most viciously. You can leave a toxic relationship. You can walk away from a manipulative boss. You can move to another city, another country, another life. But your mind? It follows. It's in every room you enter, in every breath you take, in every decision you try to make. And sometimes, it doesn't feel like a companion. It feels like a cage. So the question emerges like a crack in the wall: what if your greatest enemy isn't out there, but in here? Not because your mind is broken, but because it was never designed to bring you peace. What if the same tool that helped your ancestors survive tigers, famines, and tribal wars is now turning on you in a world where those threats no longer exist? What if your mind, trying desperately to protect you, has become the architect of your anxiety? And worse, what if you believe it? What if the stories it tells about who you are, what you're worth, and what you're capable of aren't facts, but filters? Not truths, but traps. What if you've been hypnotized by your own thinking? Here's the real horror: you can spend your entire life being imprisoned by a mind you never question. You can build careers, relationships, identities, all rooted in the whispers of a faulty narrator. You can run faster, achieve more, impress millions, and still feel hollow, because you never addressed the real problem. You never asked, who is behind the voice in my head? And why do I trust it so blindly? Now pause. Sit with that question. Let it unsettle you. Let it unravel the comfort of your certainty. Because once you suspect that your mind might be the one pulling you under, you can no longer cling to the illusion that thinking more will save you. And that's where the descent begins. Not into madness, but into clarity. Because to confront the enemy within, you must first see it clearly. Not as a monster. Not as a malfunction. But as a machine. Ancient. Automatic. Unaware of the damage it causes in a world it was never built for. So the real question isn't, how do I escape my thoughts? The real question is, what happens when you finally stop trusting them? Now let's go deeper. Because the trap runs far older, and far deeper, than just bad thoughts. It is rooted in the very way we've been conditioned to think, perceive, and exist. And it didn't start with you. It started long before you ever had a choice. You weren't born doubting yourself. You didn't enter this world wondering whether you were worthy, beautiful, intelligent, or lovable. Those thoughts were given to you. Passed down, whispered, and repeated, until you called them your own. Before you had language, your mind absorbed the emotional temperature of your surroundings. The tension in your parents' voices. The approval in their smiles. The shame in their silence. And slowly, like clay being molded by invisible hands, your mind began to form a model of reality. Not reality itself, but a map of it. And here's the catch, your map is not the territory. The philosopher Alfred Korzybski warned us of this in the early 20th century. But the idea is much older. Friedrich Nietzsche once wrote, "There are no facts, only interpretations." And yet, to the child who internalizes rejection, or the teen who feels invisible in a room full of people, those interpretations become law. That's how the enemy takes root. It doesn't storm the gates of your mind in a single, traumatic moment. Though that can happen too. More often, it seeps in slowly. Through repetition. Through social conditioning. Through every moment you were told to sit down, be quiet, get in line, or not feel what you were feeling. You learn not just what to think, but how to think. To seek approval before authenticity. To avoid discomfort at all costs. To equate productivity with worth. You became a performer. A protector. A perfectionist. But in the process, you lost something. Carl Jung called it the shadow, all the parts of yourself you were told not to be. Your anger. Your selfishness. Your wildness. Your hunger. Banished to the basement of the psyche, these aspects didn't disappear. They festered. And worse, your mind began building stories to explain their absence. I'm not angry. I'm just tired. I don't need anyone. I'm fine. I can't slow down. There's too much to do. But these aren't truths. They are defenses. Your mind, trying to protect you from pain, builds a fortress of rationalizations. But in doing so, it locks your deepest self inside. And when the real you begins to bang on the walls, when grief erupts, or anxiety swells, or rage leaks out in passive aggression, your mind does what it was trained to do: suppress, deny, distract. It's not your fault. The philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer once wrote that man can do what he wills, but he cannot will what he wills. In other words, you did not choose the mechanics of your own mind. But now, the burden is yours to bear. Because your mind is not designed for peace. It is designed for survival. Its job is not to make you happy. Its job is to scan for danger. To remember every threat. To predict every possible failure. But here's the paradox: in a world without lions and famines, your mind begins turning everyday life into a battlefield. A sideways glance becomes a judgment. A missed text becomes abandonment. A small failure becomes proof of your worthlessness. And this ancient machinery, once the key to staying alive, is now the source of your suffering. Thinkers like Viktor Frankl tried to warn us. He saw, in the concentration camps, that those who survived were not always the strongest physically, but those who found meaning, even in their pain. Meaning is what your mind cannot manufacture on its own. It loops in problems. It calculates outcomes. But it cannot tell you why you are here. That's your job. Your soul's job. Your being's job. But in the noise of modern life, that voice is drowned out. Jean-Paul Sartre called it bad faith, the denial of one's own freedom and authenticity in exchange for comfort. You play roles. You wear masks. You say yes when you want to scream no. And each compromise pulls you further away from your essence. Until one day, the mirror reflects not a person, but a persona. A ghost built from other people's expectations. That's the hidden problem. Your mind, left unchallenged, becomes a traitor to your soul. It fears the unknown. It avoids discomfort. It serves security over truth, and so it kills your aliveness softly. Not with a blade, but with a whisper: stay small. Don't risk that. Be realistic. But here's the deeper tragedy: you believe it. You trust the voice of fear more than the voice of freedom. You confuse control with safety. And in doing so, you surrender your life, inch by inch, to a mechanism that was never meant to be your master. The philosopher Alan Watts once said, "You are under no obligation to be the same person you were 5 minutes ago," but your mind doesn't know that. It clings to patterns. It fights for familiarity. It drowns out the unknown, even when the unknown is the only place transformation can occur. So here we are, caught in a war between the part of you that seeks to grow and the part of you that seeks to protect. The enemy is not evil. It is scared. It is ancient. It is doing what it was programmed to do. But that doesn't mean it should lead your life. And now, we must look at the cost. Because if the mind becomes the enemy, then what is the battlefield? What is the price you pay for trusting its fears more than your freedom? Let's look at the consequences. Imagine trying to breathe, but the air is laced with something you cannot see. You breathe it in anyway, because it's all you've ever known. No one told you the poison was real. No one told you the discomfort, the restlessness, the chronic sense that something is off, wasn't your fault. This is how the mind, your mind, betrays you without ever raising suspicion. Not with screams, but with silence. Not with sabotage, but with subtlety. When the mind becomes your enemy, it doesn't destroy you with drama. It slowly replaces you. It becomes a counterfeit version of you, just close enough to fool the world, and fool you. And the first thing it steals is your ability to be here. Your attention is hijacked, constantly. Not by evil corporations or flashing notifications, though they help. But by your own internal narrator. The one that replays old conversations. Predicts future disasters. Invents meaning where there is none. Your mind turns every moment into a problem to solve. Even silence becomes suspicious. Stillness becomes threatening. Joy becomes guilt. Don't relax, something bad will happen. And so, you stay on high alert. But vigilance has a cost. You may look composed on the outside, smartphone in hand, polite smile on cue. But inside, the noise never stops. The background hum of anxiety becomes your default. You wake up tired. You go to bed wired. Your nervous system, once built for the occasional threat of a tiger, is now stuck in a loop of micropanics. A missed email. A social slight. A number on a scale. A number in a bank account. A number on a screen telling you how much, or how little, you matter. And because your mind has confused survival with success, it whispers, you are only safe if you're winning. You are only lovable if you are improving. You are only worthy if you are chosen. These aren't just ideas. They are realities you live inside, constructed brick by your conditioning. Cognitive psychology offers us a brutal lens here. Your mind is full of what are called cognitive distortions, mental filters that warp reality to fit your fear, catastrophizing, turning a small mistake into proof that everything will collapse. Filtering, obsessing over one flaw in a sea of good. Mind reading, assuming others think about you what you already fear about yourself. Personalization, believing you are the cause of things you had no control over. Each of these is a trick the mind plays to protect your ego, but they backfire. Instead of making you safe, they keep you stuck. And worse, they become invisible. You don't question them because they feel true. You don't challenge them because they sound like you. But they're not you. They're a voice you inherited. Maybe it came from a parent who was never satisfied. Maybe it came from a culture that worships productivity. Maybe it came from a traumatic moment where you learned the world is dangerous, and people can't be trusted. So you adopted a rule: never let your guard down. Always stay one step ahead. Don't need too much. But these rules, once useful, become a prison. You stop dancing. You stop playing. You stop taking chances that don't have a clear outcome. Eventually, your life becomes efficient, but not alive. This is the unseen consequence. You become successful in a world you no longer feel part of. You check the boxes of adulthood, career, relationship, status. But something essential is missing. The ability to feel wonder. The courage to be messy. The permission to not know who you are. Instead, the mind demands answers. Definitions. Certainty. But life doesn't work that way. It's not a formula. It's a flame. The psychologist Donald Winnicott once spoke of the false self, a version of ourselves created to please others, to survive. He warned that this self could become so dominant that the real self never emerges. Now, imagine a world where most people are living as their false selves. What kind of relationships do they have? What kind of art do they make? What kind of leaders do they become? This isn't theoretical. You see it every day. The influencer smiling through burnout. The parent repeating the same emotional absence they swore to escape. The employee who hates their job but stays silent. The lover who can't feel anything anymore, but can't say goodbye either. These aren't failures of character. They are symptoms of a deeper illness, a mind that believes it is the master. A self that was never allowed to fully be. We live in a world engineered to keep this cycle spinning. Capitalism thrives on dissatisfaction. Social media thrives on comparison. Advertising thrives on insecurity. Even education rewards conformity over curiosity. And so the mind becomes a loyal citizen of this machinery. It adopts its values. It protects its illusions. It punishes you for trying to step out of line. And here's the haunting part, it does all this while convincing you that it's helping. Just one more goal. Just a little more discipline. Just fix yourself, then you'll be happy. But happiness is not the reward for becoming perfect. It is the byproduct of becoming real. And that, above all, is what the enemy inside you fears most. Because to be real, you must face what the mind has spent decades hiding, your grief. Your rage. Your longing. Your capacity for wild joy. This isn't just about neurology. It's about liberation. To escape the mind's trap, you don't need more thoughts. You need a return. To your body. To your breath. To your being. But that path is not safe. It is not linear. It will break you before it frees you. And yet, what other choice do you have? To keep living as a replica? To keep worshipping a mind that doesn't know how to love? Or to rebel? To burn the map and walk into the wilderness? Because in that wilderness, something ancient is waiting for you. Not another answer, but a different way of being. Ready to meet it? There comes a moment, quiet, strange, unmistakable, when the voices in your mind no longer sound wise. They sound tired, repetitive, mechanical. The same fears, the same doubts, the same stories, looping like a haunted lullaby. And for the first time, you don't believe them. This is not enlightenment. This is exhaustion, but it's the right kind. The kind that signals a fracture in the old machinery. The kind that says, enough. You don't want better strategies. You want truth. You don't want more affirmations. You want freedom. And freedom begins, not with the conquest of your mind, but with its dethroning. Because here is the paradox at the heart of all healing, you cannot think your way out of a prison built by thought. Rebellion doesn't begin with action. It begins with a shift so radical, so subtle, that it feels like madness. You stop trusting the voice in your head as the narrator of your life. Instead of obeying it, you observe it. Instead of fighting it, you witness. Instead of identifying with it, you ask the question that changes everything: who is listening to this voice? In that instant, you are no longer the prisoner. You are the watcher behind the bars. And from there, everything begins to change. Carl Jung called this the process of individuation. The alchemical journey where the false self is burned away, and the true self is revealed through confrontation with the unconscious. But this confrontation is not a spa treatment. It's a funeral. The part of you that was built to perform, to win approval, to fit in, it must die. Not because it was evil, but because it was never you. So how do you begin? Step 1. Disrupt the trance. Meditation, done correctly, is not about calming down. It's about waking up to the constant noise of your inner narrator, and learning not to be hypnotized by it. Every time you sit still and do nothing, the mind panics. It throws up images, worries, cravings, memories. It says, "This is boring. This is stupid. You're wasting time." But stay. Stay longer than the voice expects. Watch it squirm. Watch it try every trick to pull you back into the trance. And then, notice something. You're still here. You are not the voice. You are the space it echoes through. You are awareness itself. And awareness is unshakable. It cannot be insulted. It cannot be frightened. It cannot be broken. It simply sees. That's rebellion. Step 2. Tell the truth. Not the polished truth. Not the socially acceptable truth. Not the Instagram caption truth. The raw truth. The one you whisper at 3 a.m. when no one's around. Truth like, "I don't know who I am. I feel numb. I'm tired of pretending. I don't want to chase this dream anymore. I need help." These confessions are acts of war against the tyranny of the false self. Because the mind, when ruled by fear, builds identity like a fortress. But the soul builds identity like a fire. It burns, it transforms, it moves. If your truth makes you feel like everything's collapsing, good. That means something false is dying. Let it. Step 3. Create without permission. When you stop performing, a terrifying question arises. If I'm not doing this for approval, why do it at all? Now you're close. Because that is where real creation begins. Not to impress. Not to prove. But to express, to bring forth something honest, even if it's ugly. You pick up the paintbrush. You write the terrible poem. You sing off-key. You dance without rhythm. And something miraculous happens. You feel alive. Even if no one claps. Even if no one sees. You remember what it means to play. To explore. To fail gloriously without it meaning anything about your worth. The mind hates this. It says, "Where is this going? What's the point? Will this be good enough?" Ignore it. The moment you create for its own sake, the system loses a soldier. Step 4. Reclaim your body. The mind believes it is the center of intelligence. But the body carries truths the mind forgot. You were born into sensation. Before you had language, you had movement. Before you had self-concept, you had breath. So now, rebel by returning. Feel your feet on the ground. Feel the rise of your chest. Feel the tension in your jaw and ask, "What am I not saying?" The body remembers every betrayal, every joy, every buried scream. And when you learn to listen, you find the truth beneath the thoughts. You find your intuition, not the woo-woo cliché, but the biological compass forged through evolution and experience. Your gut knows. Your spine knows. Your tears know. And when the mind tries to override them, pause. And ask, what if the body is wiser than my thoughts? Step 5, find your people, or go alone. You don't need a crowd. You need a mirror, someone who sees through the mask. Someone who doesn't flinch when you break. Someone who doesn't offer solutions, but presence. If you can't find them, be that person for yourself. Solitude, when chosen, is holy. It is where false selves die, and real selves are born. So go into the woods. Go into the silence. Go into the pages of ancient books. Go into the breath. And meet yourself. That is the rebellion. Not a revolution of noise, but of stillness. Not a war to be won, but an illusion to be dropped. You do not need to become better. You need to remember who you were before you learned to hate yourself. Before the mind took the throne. Before fear built the cage. Because the truth is, you were never broken. You were buried. And now, the soil is shifting. The roots are moving. The real you is rising. Not to be fixed. To be found. Ready to uncover the final and deepest realization. You were never taught the most dangerous truth about your mind. Not by your teachers. Not by your parents. Not even by your therapists. Because this truth is terrifying. It doesn't offer comfort. It offers clarity, a clarity that scorches. It is this: the mind was never designed to make you happy. It was designed to keep you alive. And in the pursuit of survival, it will trade your peace, your dreams, even your soul, just to maintain a sense of control. That is why you can be safe, healthy, successful, and still feel like you're drowning. That is why even when your outer world improves, your inner critic does not soften. That is why the mind continues to find new problems to solve, new threats to chase, new reasons to panic. It is not your enemy. But it can become one, if you mistake it for you. Now, imagine this: you're standing in front of a mirror, staring into your own eyes. And suddenly, it hits you, like a thunderbolt in the chest: you are not your thoughts. You are not your emotions. You are not even your identity. You are that which sees it all. And the moment you recognize that, deeply, not just intellectually, everything begins to unravel. The shame loses its grip. The fear shrinks into a whisper. The craving dissolves into stillness. Because you are no longer inside the storm. You are watching it. And in that space between watcher and thought, there is freedom. A freedom that no ideology, no affirmation, no achievement can give you. Because it isn't added, it's uncovered. It was there all along. Buried beneath the voice that told you to try harder, be better, move faster. That voice. It is terrified of silence. Because silence is where it loses power. In silence, you don't need a reason to exist. You don't need proof of your worth. You don't need to win, impress, or justify. You are. And that, simply that, is unbearable to the mind trained in scarcity, but glorious to the soul aching for rest. This is what mystics, sages, and awakened rebels across history have been trying to say. Buddha called it emptiness. Christ called it the kingdom within. Lao Tzu called it the Tao. Rumi called it the beloved. Ramana Maharshi called it the self. Jung called it individuation. Frankl called it meaning. Nietzsche called it the overman. Different languages. Same pointing finger. They were never trying to give you new beliefs. They were trying to take something away. The illusion. The mask. The prison of thought pretending to be truth. Because once you see it, really see it, it becomes laughable. This thing that tormented you. This voice that told you you were broken. It's just noise. Like radio static. It doesn't need to be silenced. It just needs to be seen through. And when you see through it, you no longer obey it. You no longer worship it. You no longer fear it. You sit back. You breathe. And you watch. And slowly, the spell breaks. You feel something ancient rise up from inside you, not a thought, but a knowing. Not a script, but a presence. A quiet, rooted awareness that says, you were never lost. You were only listening to the wrong voice. And here's the final twist: the enemy was never the mind. The enemy was your identification with it. You were holding a knife to your own throat, calling it protection. But now, you let go. Now, you return. To what? To the now. To the breath. To the moment before the story begins. Where you are not the hero, not the failure, not the identity. You are the awareness within which all of that rises and falls. And from that awareness, ironically, you can use the mind as it was meant to be used. Not as a tyrant, but as a tool. You give it tasks, you thank it for its service. And when it begins to chatter again, you smile. You no longer believe everything it says. You don't fight it. You don't obey it. You simply witness. And that witnessing, is the doorway to real power. Because now, finally, your happiness is not a destination. It is your default state. Not euphoric. Not manic. But peaceful. Still. Unshakable. The mind cannot manufacture that. It can only fall silent before it. And once that silence becomes familiar, once you live from that center, you realize something else. You don't need to be special. You don't need to be certain. You don't need to be healed. You just need to remember who you were before the world told you who to be. Who you were before you could explain yourself. Who you are when there's nothing left to fix. And so, the final, most powerful realization is not something to achieve. It is something to stop forgetting. You are not the storm. You are the sky. You are not the thought. You are the space between. You are not broken. You are the witness of breaking and healing. You are not the mind. You are the one who sees it. Always have been. Always will be. And once you see that, truly see it, you are free. Not in the way the mind defines freedom, but in the way a bird is free the moment it realizes the cage was never locked. Now the question remains, what will you do with this freedom? What story will you live, knowing it's just a dream? What will you create, now that nothing needs to be proven? What will you become, now that you've stopped trying to become anything at all? The silence holds its breath and waits.